I stood in the lawyer's office, holding the legal document in my trembling hands. My parents had just sold my patent, the project I had spent 3 years of my life creating, for only $10,000. They called it a silly game, worthless, not worth their time. But 6 months later, I sat alone in my tiny apartment watching the tech news, my breath catching in my throat as the anchor announced that the company which bought my patent had just been valued at $1 billion. And now, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was them, my parents, begging me to share what should have been mine all along. I couldn't bring myself to answer their calls. I sat frozen on my worn couch in my Austin studio apartment, staring at my phone as it vibrated again and again on the coffee table. Each buzz felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together just to keep them still. How did it come to this? How did I lose everything I'd worked for? 3 years ago, everything was different. I was 28 years old working as a software engineer at a small tech company in Seattle. The job paid $55,000 a year, enough to cover my rent in a modest one-bedroom apartment and save a little each month. But the real work, the work that mattered, happened after hours. Every evening after dinner, I would lock myself in my bedroom and dive into my research. I was developing an AI algorithm, something I believed could revolutionize the way data centers consumed energy. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. By using machine learning to predict load patterns and optimize cooling systems in real time, my algorithm could reduce energy consumption in data centers by 70%. 70%. That wasn't just an improvement. That was transformative. I had poured every cent of my savings into this dream. $30,000 went to patent attorneys who helped me file a provisional patent application that September. I worked weekends, skipped vacations, lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. My friends stopped inviting me out because I always said no. My last relationship had ended because my boyfriend couldn't understand why I spent more time with my laptop than with him. But I didn't care. This was my purpose. This was going to be my legacy. My family never understood. My father, Harold, was 58 years old, a former chief financial officer who had retired early after a successful career in corporate finance. He controlled every aspect of our family's money with an iron fist, making spreadsheets for everything, questioning every purchase. My mother, Patricia, 56, had been an accountant before she retired. She always deferred to my father's judgment on financial matters. And then there was my younger brother, Garrett, 25, fresh out of business school with an MBA and an ego the size of Texas. He liked to remind everyone that he was going to be a millionaire before he turned 30. They all lived in Portland, Oregon, about a 3-hour drive from my Seattle apartment. That Thanksgiving, 3 years ago, I made the mistake of trying to share my excitement with them. We were gathered around the dining table, the turkey growing cold as I pulled out my laptop to show them my prototype. I had practiced my pitch a dozen times, anticipating their questions, ready to dazzle them with the potential of what I'd created. My father barely looked at the screen before waving his hand dismissively. "This is a child's game, Dakota. Do you think you're Steve Jobs now? You're a junior engineer at a no-name company. This is fantasy." The words hit me like a slap across the face, but I tried again. "Dad, please, just look at the numbers. If even one major tech company adopts this technology." "Numbers?" He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You don't understand business, sweetheart. You understand code. There's a difference." My mother set down her wine glass and reached across the table to pat my hand. "Dakota, honey, your father is right. You should focus on your real job. And honestly, you're getting to an age where you should be thinking about settling down, finding a husband. This computer stuff is fine as a hobby, but it's not a hobby, Mom. This is my career. This is my future." Garrett leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Sis, you don't get it. I've studied business. I know how startups work. You can't just build something and expect it to sell. You need market analysis, competitive positioning, a go-to-market strategy. You're just an engineer. You don't understand the real world." I left dinner early that night, my laptop clutched to my chest, tears burning in my eyes as I drove back to Seattle in the dark. But their dismissal only made me more determined. I was going to prove them wrong. I was going to show them that my silly patent was worth something. For the next 6 months, I worked like a woman possessed. I refined my algorithm, built a working prototype, tested it against every scenario I could imagine. Then I started reaching out to companies. I sent proposals to the 5 largest tech companies in the country. 4 of them rejected me within a week. Their form letters thanking me for my interest but explaining that my technology didn't fit their current strategic priorities. But the 5th company, a mid-sized firm called Green Tech Solutions, responded differently. They wanted to meet. I'll never forget that phone call. It was a Tuesday morning in April, and I was sitting at my desk at work when my cell phone buzzed. The area code was from California. Miss Dakota? The voice was smooth, professional. This is Richard Chen from Green Tech Solutions. We've reviewed your patent application, and we're very interested in discussing a potential acquisition. My heart nearly stopped. You want to buy my patent? We'd like to explore that possibility, yes. Would you be available to fly down to our Palo Alto office next week? We'll cover all your expenses, of course. I flew to California the following Monday. The meeting lasted 4 hours. They grilled me on every aspect of my algorithm, tested my prototype, ran simulations. And at the end, Richard looked at me across the conference table and said the words I'd been dreaming of hearing. We want to acquire your technology, Dakota. We're prepared to offer you $350,000 for full rights to the patent. $350,000. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having. I could pay off my student loans. I could start my own company. I could finally prove to my family that I wasn't just a dreamer. I need a few days to review the contract, I told them, trying to keep my voice steady even as I wanted to scream with joy. Of course, take your time. We'll send over the paperwork this week. But there was a problem I didn't know about. A problem that would destroy everything. When I had filed my provisional patent application, I had used my parents' address in Portland as my primary contact address because I was between apartments at the time, staying in a short-term rental while I searched for a permanent place. I was 28 years old, and due to some complex intellectual property laws that I didn't fully understand, my young age and the use of my parents' address meant that their names appeared on the filing as legal guardians. I had no idea that this technicality gave them legal co-ownership of my patent. GreenTech's lawyers had discovered this detail when they did their due diligence, and instead of contacting me, they contacted Harold and Patricia first. 2 days after my meeting in California, my phone rang. It was my father. Dakota, your mother and I need to speak with you. It's urgent. Come home this weekend. The tone of his voice made my stomach twist with unease, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe they wanted to apologize for how they'd treated me at Thanksgiving. Maybe they'd heard about GreenTech's interest and wanted to congratulate me. I drove to Portland that Saturday morning, the contract from GreenTech still unsigned in my laptop bag. I even practiced in the car how I would tell them about the $350,000 offer, imagining their shocked faces, their pride, maybe even an apology. When I walked into their house, I knew immediately that something was wrong. Harold and Patricia were sitting at the dining room table, their faces grave and serious. Garrett was there too, leaning against the kitchen counter with his arms crossed and a strange smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Sit down, Dakota," my father said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat slowly, setting my purse on the floor beside me. "What's going on? You said it was urgent." Harold steepled his fingers, looking at me over the top of his reading glasses. "I've been doing some research into this patent of yours. Your mother and I received some very interesting phone calls this week." "From GreenTech?" I asked, my excitement building despite the tension in the room. "They told you about the offer?" "Dad, it's $350,000. Can you believe it?" "No," Harold said flatly. "That's not the offer they made to us." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Patricia leaned forward, her expression almost pitying. "Sweetheart, you used our address when you filed that patent, and because of your age and some legal technicalities, we have co-ownership rights. GreenTech contacted us directly." "I know they contacted you," I said, confusion making my voice sharp. "They probably wanted to verify the information. But the offer is for me. It's my patent. I created it." "The law doesn't see it that way," Harold said. He pulled out a folder from the chair beside him and slid it across the table. "We consulted with our own attorney. According to the filing, We're listed as legal guardians on the patent. That gives us the right to make decisions about its sale. My hands were shaking as I opened the folder. Inside were pages of legal documents, highlighted sections about guardianship and intellectual property rights. The words swam before my eyes. "This can't be right," I whispered. "This is my work. I spent 3 years on this. I spent every cent I had." "And you made a mistake," Garrett interjected, his voice dripping with condescension. "You didn't understand the legal implications of your filing. That's what happens when you try to do things without proper business expertise." I looked up at my father, desperate. "Dad, please, just let me handle this. GreenTech made me an offer, $350,000. We can all benefit from this." Harold's expression hardened. "That's not the offer they made to us, Dakota. When they called me, they explained that the market conditions have changed. AI technology is being overvalued right now, and there's a correction coming. The $350,000 figure was preliminary, contingent on further analysis." "That's not true," I said, my voice rising. "They never said anything about that to me." "Because you're not a business person," Patricia said gently. "You don't understand how negotiations work. These companies make big promises and then pull back at the last minute. It's a tactic. The real offer," Harold continued, "is $10,000. Cash. Immediate payment. They told me they're taking a risk even at that price, but they're willing to do it as a favor because they know we're a good family." The room went silent. I stared at my father, certain I had misheard him. $10,000? That's insane. That's less than what I spent on the patent attorneys. "It's the reality of the market, Dakota." Harold opened another folder and pulled out a contract. "And your mother and I have made the decision to accept it. We signed this morning." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. You signed? Without talking to me?" "We're protecting you," Patricia said. $10,000 is real money, sweetheart. $350,000 was always a fantasy. This way, at least you get something." I felt like I was drowning. "When did you sign?" "The contract I have says." "That contract is void," Harold interrupted. "Because we're the legal co-owners, we had the right to negotiate our own terms. GreenTech's lawyers confirmed it. The deal is done. They're transferring the $10,000 to our account next week." "Our account?" I could barely breathe. "It's my patent. If you sold it, the money should come to me." Garrett pushed off from the counter and walked over to stand beside our father. "Actually, sis, that's where it gets interesting. See, Mom and Dad talked to me about this opportunity. They know I've been working on my own startup, and I need capital, so they've agreed to give me half of the $5,000 to invest in my business. It's going to generate real returns, unlike your little hobby project." I looked at the three of them, understanding crashing over me like a wave of ice water. This wasn't about protecting me. This wasn't about market conditions or legal technicalities. This was about Garrett. This was about my parents choosing my brother over me, just like they always had. "This is theft," I said, my voice shaking. "You stole my work. You stole my future." Harold's face turned red. "Watch your tone, young lady. We didn't steal anything. We exercised our legal rights. If you had been smart enough to understand the law, you would have filed the patent correctly in the first place. This is your own fault." "You're 28 years old, Dakota," Patricia added. "You should be grateful that we're trying to teach you how the real world works. This is a lesson. Dreams don't pay the bills." I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. "A lesson? You took away 3 years of my life, everything I worked for, and you call it a lesson?" "Don't be dramatic," Harold said dismissively. "You still have your job. You still have your little apartment. You'll be fine. And maybe now you'll stop wasting your time on these foolish schemes and focus on finding a stable future." I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to tear up the contract they'd signed and burn it to ashes. But I couldn't, because they were right about one thing. It was legal. They had the right to sign. They had the right to sell my patent out from under me. Garrett had the audacity to walk over and put his hand on my shoulder. "Look, sis, I know you're upset. But in a few years, when my startup is successful, I'll remember that you were part of making it happen. This $5,000 is going to be the seed money that changes my life. You should be proud." I shrugged off his hand and grabbed my purse. "I'm leaving." "Dakota, sit down," Harold commanded. "We're not finished talking." "Yes, we are." I looked at each of them in turn. My father with his cold, calculating eyes, my mother with her weak, apologetic smile, my brother with his smug sense of superiority. We are absolutely finished. I walked out of that house, and I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove, tears streaming down my face, my entire world crumbling around me. By the time I reached the highway, I was sobbing so hard I had to pull over onto the shoulder. I had lost everything. My patent, my dream, my family's respect. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing, I could do about it. 3 months passed in a blur of pain and disorientation. I couldn't bear to stay in Seattle anymore. Every street, every coffee shop reminded me of the dreams I'd had, the future I'd been building. So I quit my job, packed everything I owned into my old Honda Civic, and drove south to Austin, Texas. I told myself it was a fresh start. Austin was booming with tech startups. I could freelance, build a new portfolio, maybe eventually find my way back to something that mattered. But the truth was simpler and sadder. I was running away. I found a tiny studio apartment in a building that had seen better days. The rent was $800 a month, which was all I could afford on the irregular income from freelance web development projects. Most days I worked from 7 in the morning until 11 at night, not because I had that much work, but because I needed to exhaust myself enough to sleep without dreaming about what I'd lost. I didn't talk to my family. Harold called twice in the first month, leaving voicemails that I deleted without listening to. Patricia sent a few text messages asking if I was okay. I never responded. Garrett sent me a message saying his startup was going great and thanking me for being part of his success. I blocked his number. The loneliness was crushing. I had no friends in Austin, no social life, no purpose beyond the next project deadline. I ate meals alone, worked alone, slept alone in my empty apartment with its bare walls and secondhand furniture. But the worst part was the what-ifs that haunted me every single day. What if I had filed the patent differently? What if I had hired a better lawyer? What if I had understood the legal implications of using my parents' address? What if I had never told my family about my project in the first place? One night in April, exactly 6 months after my parents had sold my patent, I was sitting on my threadbare couch eating instant ramen straight from the pot. I had been working for 14 hours straight on a website redesigned for a local coffee shop, and my eyes were burning with fatigue. I turned on the television just to hear human voices, something to fill the silence of my apartment. Bloomberg Technology News was on, though I barely paid attention as I mechanically lifted noodles to my mouth. Then the anchor said something that made me freeze with my fork halfway to my lips. And in our top story tonight, Amazon has announced the acquisition of GreenTech Solutions for $1.2 billion. The deal, which shocked analysts, values the mid-sized energy optimization firm at nearly 20 times its previous valuation. Industry experts say the key asset is GreenTech's revolutionary AI algorithm that can reduce data center energy consumption by up to 70%. The fork slipped from my hand and clattered into the pot. 70%. Those were my numbers. That was my algorithm. I lunged for the remote and turned up the volume, my heart hammering against my ribs. The screen showed footage of GreenTech's CEO, a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit, shaking hands with Amazon executives. Behind them was a presentation slide showing energy consumption graphs, efficiency curves, projected savings that ran into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The technology at the heart of this acquisition, the anchor continued, is a machine learning system that GreenTech acquired last year. While the original developer remains unnamed, sources say this algorithm represents the future of sustainable computing. Amazon plans to implement it across all of its data centers worldwide within the next 18 months. Unnamed developer. They didn't even mention my name. They had taken my work, my 3 years of research and sacrifice, bought it for $10,000, and now it was worth over $1 billion. I sat there, staring at the screen long after the segment ended, and moved on to other news. My ramen had gone cold. My hands were shaking. I felt like I was going to be sick. $1.2 billion. GreenTech had been bought for $1.2 billion, almost entirely because of technology I had created. Technology my parents had sold for the price of a used car. I thought about the $5,000 they'd given to Garrett for his startup. I thought about how Harold had called my work a silly game. I thought about Patricia telling me to focus on finding a husband instead. I thought about all of it, and something inside me shattered. I dropped to my knees on the floor of my tiny apartment, and I cried. Not the angry tears I'd shed when I left Portland, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere so far down inside me I didn't know it existed. I cried for the recognition I would never receive, for the future that had been stolen, for the naive 28-year-old girl who had believed her family would support her dreams. When I finally stopped crying, my phone was ringing. Through my blurred vision, I saw the name on the screen. Dad. I stared at the phone for a long moment, watching it vibrate on the coffee table. Every instinct told me not to answer, but some terrible curiosity made me reach out and swipe to accept the call. Dakota. Harold's voice was higher than usual, almost cheerful. Sweetheart, I'm so glad you answered. I've been trying to reach you. I said nothing. My throat felt raw from crying. Did you see the news? He continued, not waiting for my response. About GreenTech? It's incredible, isn't it? $1.2 billion. That's with a B. What do you want? My voice came out flat, emotionless. Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Your mother and I have been discussing this, and we think there might be an opportunity here for us, for all of us. An opportunity. Yes. He sounded excited now, energized in a way I hadn't heard since before he retired. Listen, Dakota. I know the sale of the patent was difficult for you to accept, but now we can see that we made a mistake. GreenTech clearly deceived us about the value of the technology. They told us the market was declining, that AI was overvalued, but they were lying. They knew exactly how valuable your algorithm was. My algorithm, I repeated. You just said it was mine. Of course it's yours, sweetheart. You created it. We've never disputed that. But the point is, GreenTech committed fraud. They lied to us about the market conditions to get us to accept a lowball offer. That's illegal. We can sue them. I closed my eyes. We. Yes, we. As a family. Together. He paused, and when I didn't respond, he continued more urgently. Dakota, think about it. We have a legitimate case. They paid us $10,000 for technology they knew was worth hundreds of millions. Any court would see that as fraud and misrepresentation. We could get a massive settlement. And how much of that settlement would you want, Dad? There was a brief silence. Well, we'd split it evenly, of course. We're family. We share everything. Share everything. I laughed, a bitter sound that didn't feel like it came from me. Like you shared the decision to sell my patent? Like you shared the $5,000 you gave to Garrett? Now, Dakota, there's no need to bring up old grievances. This is about moving forward, about getting what we deserve. What we deserve, I echoed. Tell me, Dad, when you say split it evenly, what exactly do you mean? 50-50? After you stole my work and sold it without my knowledge? We didn't steal anything, Harold said, his voice sharpening. We exercised our legal rights as co-owners. And if you had any business sense at all, you'd see that working together is the smart move here. I've already spoken with a lawyer. His name is Stanford Mitchell. He specializes in fraud cases against tech companies. He says we have an excellent chance of winning a settlement in the range of $100 million or more. $100 million. 6 months ago, I would have been breathless at such a figure. Now it just made me tired. And you want half of that, I said. Harold hesitated. Well, given that we're the ones who signed the contract, and we're the ones who were technically defrauded, I think 50-50 is more than fair. But we can discuss the details. The important thing is that we act quickly, before GreenTech tries to cover their tracks. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with another call. It was my mother, probably calling on the other line to add her voice to Harold's pitch. I need to think about this, I said. Don't think too long, Harold warned. There are statutes of limitations on fraud claims. We need to file within the next few months. I hung up without saying goodbye. Immediately, the phone rang again. This time it was Garrett. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hey, sis. His voice had none of our father's forced cheerfulness. He sounded almost nervous. I guess you talked to Dad. He just called. Right. Look, I know this is awkward, but I wanted to reach out personally. I think we should talk about this GreenTech situation. It's a real opportunity. An opportunity for you to get more money, you mean? That's not fair, Dakota. I know you're angry about how things went down with the patent sale. But this is different. This is about holding a massive corporation accountable for screwing over our family. Our family? I said slowly. The same family that took my work and sold it for $10,000 so you could fund your startup. How's that going, by the way? Garrett was quiet for a moment. Not great, if I'm being honest. What happened to becoming a millionaire by 30? The market shifted. We couldn't get second-round funding. I had to shut it down last month. He paused. I lost all of it, Dakota. The $5,000 from Mom and Dad plus another $15,000 I borrowed on credit cards. I'm $20,000 in debt right now. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt hollow. So now you want to sue GreenTech to bail yourself out. It's not like that, Garrett protested. Okay, yes, I need the money. But more than that, I think it's the right thing to do. They lied to us. They exploited our ignorance. Don't you want to make them pay for that? Before I could answer, call waiting beeped again. Patricia. I have to go, Garrett. Just think about it, okay? We could all benefit from this. You, me, Mom, and Dad. We could be set for life. I switched to my mother's call. Hello, Mom. Oh, Dakota. Thank goodness. Patricia's voice was thick with tears. I've been so worried about you. You haven't returned any of my messages. What do you want, Mom? I need to talk to you about something important. About Garrett. She took a shaky breath. Your father doesn't know I'm telling you this, but we're in trouble financially. Garrett didn't just lose the $5,000 we gave him. After his startup failed, he asked us for more money. We gave him another $15,000 from our retirement savings to help him pay off debts. You gave him $20,000 total. Yes. And now our retirement account is almost empty. We have maybe $30,000 left to live on. Your father is furious with Garrett, though he won't admit it. We can't afford our house much longer. We might have to sell and move into something smaller. For the first time in the conversation, I felt a flicker of genuine emotion. Not sympathy exactly, but something close to it. They had ruined themselves trying to support Garrett's fantasy, just like they had ruined me. I'm sorry to hear that, Mom, I said carefully, but I don't understand what you want from me. The lawsuit, Dakota, against GreenTech. If we win, even a small settlement would save us. 20 million, 10 million, even 5 million would be enough to retire comfortably and help Garrett get back on his feet. She paused. I know we hurt you. I know we made terrible mistakes. But you're our daughter. Family has to help family. Please. I thought about all the times they hadn't helped me. All the times they dismissed my dreams, belittled my accomplishments, chosen Garrett over me. And now they were asking me to save them. I need time to think, I said. Of course, sweetheart. Take all the time you need. Just please, consider it. We love you. We've always loved you, even when we didn't show it the right way. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment for a long time. My family was falling apart. They had betrayed me, taken everything I had worked for, and now they were drowning in the consequences of their own greed and favoritism. I could help them, or I could walk away and let them suffer. Either choice would define who I was and who I would become. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Bryce Thompson, the intellectual property lawyer I had consulted 3 months ago when I first arrived in Austin. He had told me then that I had no case, that my parents' actions were legal even if they were morally wrong. But that was before GreenTech was bought for over $1 billion. That was before I knew they had lied about market conditions. I sent Bryce a text. Can we meet tomorrow? I think I have a case after all. His response came within minutes. My office, 9 a.m. I saw the news. We need to talk. Bryce Thompson's office was in a converted warehouse in East Austin, the kind of space that tried hard to look both professional and hip. Exposed brick walls, modern glass desks, a coffee station with a fancy Italian espresso machine. When I arrived the next morning, Bryce was already waiting in the conference room, surrounded by folders and a laptop showing what looked like legal documents. He stood when I entered, extending his hand. Bryce was 35, with sandy hair that was always slightly messy and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look more like a graduate student than a lawyer. But I knew from our previous consultation that he was sharp, experienced, and brutally honest. Dakota. Good to see you again, though I wish it were under better circumstances. He gestured to a chair. I assume this is about the Green Tech acquisition. You saw the news. Everyone in tech law saw the news. $1.2 billion for a company that was barely on the radar 6 months ago. And the asset that drove the acquisition was an AI energy optimization algorithm. He looked at me steadily. Your algorithm? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Bryce sat down across from me and pulled up a file on his laptop. I did some research after you texted. I pulled the patent filing, the transfer documents, everything I could find in public records. And I think you might have a case. My father said the same thing. He wants to sue together. I'm sure he does. Bryce's expression was carefully neutral. But before we talk about that, I need to understand what you want, Dakota. Do you want to work with your family on this? Or do you want to pursue this independently? The question hung in the air between us. I thought about Harold's eager phone call, Patricia's tearful plea, Garrett's desperate need for money. Independently, I said. I don't want to work with them. Bryce nodded slowly. That's going to be harder. Your parents were the ones who signed the contract with Green Tech. Legally, they were the primary victims of any fraud. You were cut out of the process entirely, which actually makes your position more complicated. But it was my work. I created the algorithm. I filed the provisional patent. They only had rights because of a technicality. I understand. And that's the angle we'd have to pursue. We'd need to prove that Green Tech deliberately targeted your parents because they knew your parents didn't understand the technology's value. We'd need to show that Green Tech misrepresented the market conditions and that they knew the algorithm was worth far more than $10,000 at the time of sale. Can we prove that? Bryce leaned back in his chair. Maybe. It depends on what evidence we can gather. Do you have any contacts at Green Tech? Anyone who might be willing to talk about what happened behind the scenes? I thought for a moment, then remembered something. Trevor Hayes. He was an engineer at Green Tech when they evaluated my algorithm. We exchanged a few emails back when I was negotiating with them. He seemed genuinely interested in the technology, asked good questions about the implementation. Is he still at Green Tech? I don't know. I haven't talked to him since before my parents sold the patent. Bryce made a note. Find out. If he's left the company, he might be willing to share information about what Green Tech knew and when they knew it. We need internal communications, emails, anything that shows they deliberately lowballed your parents while knowing the technology's true value. And if I can't find evidence like that, then it becomes much harder. We'd be relying on circumstantial evidence and expert testimony about market valuation. It's doable, but expensive and risky. He paused. Dakota, I need to be honest with you about the costs here. A case like this, going up against a company that was just acquired by Amazon for over $1 billion, they're going to fight hard. We're looking at legal fees in the range of $150,000, minimum. I felt my stomach drop. I don't have that kind of money. I'm barely scraping by on freelance work. I know. Which is why I'd propose working on a contingency basis. I take 30% of any settlement or judgment we win. If we lose, you don't owe me anything. 30%. It was a lot, but it was also my only option. Okay. Yes. Let's do it. Bryce smiled slightly. You're sure you don't want to work with your parents on this? It would make the case stronger, and you could split the legal costs. I thought about Harold's assumption that he deserved 50% of any settlement. I thought about the $20,000 they'd given Garrett while I struggled alone. I thought about Patricia calling my life's work a hobby and telling me to find a husband. I'm sure. All right. Bryce pulled out a contract. Then let's get started. First step is finding Trevor Hayes and seeing what he knows. I spent the next 2 weeks tracking down Trevor. His LinkedIn profile showed he had left Green Tech 3 months after they bought my patent. He was now working as an independent consultant. I sent him a carefully worded email explaining who I was and asking if he'd be willing to talk about his time at Green Tech. His response came the next day. Dakota, I remember you and your algorithm. I'd be happy to talk. I left Green Tech because I disagreed with how they did business. Call me. We met at a coffee shop in San Jose. Trevor was in his 40s, with graying hair and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much corporate politics. When I explained what had happened, how my parents had sold the patent for $10,000, his face darkened. "They screwed you," he said bluntly. "And they screwed your parents too, though your parents were idiots for signing without you. Do you have any proof that GreenTech knew the algorithm was worth more?" Trevor was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. Then he looked up at me. "I shouldn't do this. I signed an NDA when I left, but what they did to you was wrong." He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. "I kept copies of some emails before I left, including some that might interest you." He showed me his screen. It was an email chain from last year, dated 2 weeks before my parents sold the patent. The subject line read, "Dakota Energy Optimization Tech, Valuation and Acquisition Strategy." I read the first email, from GreenTech's CEO to their head of acquisitions. "Analysis confirms this algorithm could reduce our operating costs by 60 to 70%. Conservative estimate puts value at 50 million to 100 million if we can scale it. Maximum acquisition price should not exceed 500,000. Target is 10,000 to 25,000 given patent holders' obvious lack of business sophistication." My hands were shaking as I held the phone. They knew. They knew exactly how valuable it was. "Keep reading," Trevor said grimly. The next email was even worse. It was from the head of acquisitions to the legal team. "Recommend negotiating directly with Harold and Patricia, per legal advice. Daughter Dakota is the technical expert and will understand the technology's value. Parents appear to have decision-making authority and lack technical knowledge. Exploit this gap." "Exploit this gap," I whispered. "They deliberately went after my parents because they knew I would have fought for a fair price." Trevor nodded. "I'm sorry, Dakota. I tried to speak up during the acquisition process. I told them it wasn't right. That's part of why I left." "Will you testify? Will you provide these emails as evidence?" "Yes, I will." He looked at me seriously. "But you need to understand what you're up against. Amazon owns GreenTech now. They have unlimited resources for legal defense. This is going to be a brutal fight. I don't care. I'm done letting them win." I flew back to Austin that night with Trevor's emails forwarded to Bryce's secure server. When we met the next morning, Bryce's eyes were bright with something that looked like vindication. "This is it," he said, scrolling through the emails on his laptop. "This is exactly what we need. Clear evidence that GreenTech knowingly defrauded your parents by misrepresenting the value and specifically targeting them instead of you. So we can win? We have a strong case, probably strong enough that they'll want to settle rather than go to trial." He paused. "But Dakota, you need to prepare yourself. Your parents are going to find out about this. They're going to be furious that you're pursuing this without them." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was Harold. "That's them now," I said. "Don't answer. Not yet. We need to file the lawsuit first. Establish your independent claim. Once the paperwork is filed, then you can talk to them." But my phone kept ringing. Harold, then Patricia, then Garrett, then Harold again. Finally, I turned it off. 1 week later, Bryce filed a lawsuit in federal court. Dakota Mitchell versus GreenTech Solutions and Amazon.com, Incorporated. We were suing for $300 million in damages for fraud, misrepresentation, and unjust enrichment. The same day the lawsuit was filed, my parents filed their own lawsuit, seeking $200 million. Now there were 2 separate cases, both claiming GreenTech had committed fraud in the acquisition of my patent, and the legal battle that would define the rest of my life had officially begun. The next 6 months were the longest of my life. Both lawsuits moved forward on parallel tracks, occasionally intersecting in ways that made everything more complicated. My parents' lawyer tried multiple times to get our cases consolidated, which would have forced me to work with Harold and Patricia. Bryce fought those motions successfully, arguing that I had independent standing as the original creator of the technology. The legal fees mounted quickly. Even with Bryce working on contingency, there were court costs, expert witness fees, and deposition expenses. I burned through what little savings I had and took on every freelance project I could find, working 18-hour days to keep myself afloat. GreenTech and Amazon assembled a legal team that could only be described as terrifying. 5 lawyers from 2 different top-tier firms, each billing at least $800 an hour. They filed motion after motion, trying to get both lawsuits dismissed, arguing that the original contract was valid and enforceable. The first major hearing came in September. Both my case and my parents' case were scheduled for preliminary motions on the same day, in the same courthouse, though in different courtrooms. It was the first time I had seen Harold, Patricia, and Garrett in over a year. I arrived at the courthouse early, wearing the only professional suit I owned, a navy blue ensemble I had bought at a discount store. I was sitting on a bench outside the courtroom when I saw them walking down the hall. My father in an expensive charcoal suit, my mother in a cream-colored dress, Garrett trailing behind in khakis and a blazer. Harold saw me first. His face went red immediately. He changed course and walked directly toward me. "Dakota," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We need to talk." "We don't have anything to talk about, Dad." "The hell we don't." He glanced around at the other people in the hallway and lowered his voice. "You're sabotaging your own family. If you had worked with us, we could have presented a unified front. Instead, you've weakened both cases." "I'm not working with people who stole from me." "We didn't steal anything," Patricia interjected, coming to stand beside Harold. "Dakota, please, can't we put aside our differences just long enough to hold Greentech accountable? You didn't want to put aside differences when you sold my patent without telling me. You didn't want to work together when you gave Garrett half the money. Don't pretend you care about family now that it's convenient." Garrett stepped forward, his expression pleading. "Sis, come on. This is getting out of hand. We're all gonna lose if we keep fighting each other instead of fighting them." Before I could respond, Bryce appeared at my elbow. "Dakota, we need to go in. Judge is ready." I stood without another word to my family and followed Bryce into the courtroom. As we walked through the doors, I heard Harold say behind me, "She's going to regret this." The hearing lasted 3 hours. Greentech's lawyers argued that both lawsuits should be dismissed because the original sale was legitimate, properly documented, and legally binding. They claimed that any regret about the sales price didn't constitute fraud, and that the patent holders, my parents, had been represented by counsel and had every opportunity to negotiate better terms. Bryce countered with Trevor's emails, demonstrating clear intent to deceive. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Sandra Morrison, read through the emails carefully, her expression growing more severe with each page. When Greentech's lead attorney, a man named Richard Stanford, tried to argue that the emails were taken out of context, Judge Morrison cut him off. "Mr. Stanford, I've read these communications. They explicitly state an intention to target the patent holders based on their lack of technical expertise. That's not context. That's evidence of deliberate exploitation. Your Honor, business negotiations often involve strategic considerations. Strategic considerations are one thing. Deliberately misrepresenting market conditions to inexperienced sellers is quite another." She closed the file. Motion to dismiss is denied. This case will proceed to discovery. It was a victory, but a small one. We still had to prove our case, and discovery meant months more of legal warfare. The breakthrough came in December during depositions. Greentech's CEO, a man named Douglas Peterson, was required to testify under oath about the acquisition of my patent. Bryce questioned him for 6 hours, methodically walking through every email, every meeting, every decision. Finally, near the end of the deposition, Bryce asked the critical question, "Mr. Peterson, when your team recommended acquiring the Dakota Mitchell algorithm, did they provide you with a valuation analysis?" Peterson hesitated. "Yes, they did." "And what was the estimated value of the algorithm at the time of acquisition?" "I don't recall the exact figure." Bryce slid a document across the table. "Let me refresh your memory. This is an internal memo from your head of technology, dated 3 weeks before you purchased the patent. It estimates the value at between $50 million and $100 million. Do you see that?" Peterson's face went pale. "Yes, I see it. And yet you authorized the acquisition team to offer only $10,000 to the patent holders. Is that correct?" "We negotiated in good faith." "Did you or did you not authorize your team to target the patent holders' parents specifically because they lacked technical expertise?" "I don't recall specifically." "Mr. Peterson, I'm going to show you another email. This one is from you to your general counsel. It says, and I quote, Make sure we only negotiate with the parents. The daughter will know what this is worth. Do you remember writing that? The room went silent. Peterson looked at his lawyers, who were frantically whispering to each other. I need to consult with my counsel, Peterson said. The deposition was suspended. 2 days later, GreenTech's lawyers called Bryce with a settlement offer. They wanted to meet in person. The meeting was held in a conference room at a downtown Austin hotel. GreenTech sent 3 lawyers and their head of business affairs. I sat next to Bryce, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The lead lawyer, Richard Stanford, opened a leather portfolio and slid a document across the table. Miss Mitchell, our clients are prepared to offer you $50 million to settle this matter. In exchange, you would drop the lawsuit and sign a comprehensive confidentiality agreement. $50 million. It was more money than I had ever imagined having. I could pay off every debt, buy a house, start a company, never worry about money again. And what about my parents' lawsuit? I asked. Stanford's expression didn't change. That's a separate matter. This offer is exclusively for you. So they would get nothing? They are the ones who signed the contract, Miss Mitchell. They are the ones who bear legal responsibility for the sale. You, on the other hand, were shut out of the process entirely. We're acknowledging that wrong with this offer. I looked at Bryce, who kept his expression carefully neutral. He had told me this might happen, that GreenTech would try to divide us. I thought about Harold and Patricia, about how they had sold my work without even asking me. I thought about the years I had spent building something they dismissed as worthless. I thought about Garrett spending half the money on his failed startup. And then I thought about why I had started this lawsuit in the first place. No, I said. Stanford blinked. I'm sorry? No. I don't accept your offer. Miss Mitchell, this is $50 million. Most people don't earn that much in a lifetime. I don't care about the money. Not just the money, anyway. I leaned forward. I want something else. I want public recognition that the algorithm was mine. I want my name on the patent. I want the world to know that I created the technology that's worth over $1 billion. Stanford exchanged glances with the other GreenTech lawyers. That's not something we're prepared to offer. Then we'll see you in court. I stood up, and Bryce followed my lead. We walked out of that conference room, leaving $50 million on the table. In the hallway, Bryce turned to me. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen a client do. Which do you think it was? He smiled. Brave. Definitely brave. The trial began in March, almost a year after I had first filed the lawsuit. By this time, my parents' case had been partially settled. GreenTech had agreed to pay them $50 million in exchange for dropping their lawsuit. Harold, Patricia, and Garrett were free to walk away with their money. But they wanted to testify. Harold took the stand as a witness in my case, and Bryce questioned him about the sale. Mr. Mitchell, when GreenTech contacted you about purchasing your daughter's patent, did they tell you they had valued the technology at $50 million to $100 million? Harold shifted in his seat. No, they did not. Did they tell you that they were specifically avoiding negotiations with your daughter because she would understand the technology's value? No. Did they tell you that they planned to implement the algorithm across their entire business within 6 months? No. So you made the decision to sell based on incomplete and deliberately misleading information? Harold's jaw tightened. Yes, they lied to us. It was the first time I had ever heard my father admit he had been manipulated. There was something almost satisfying about it, watching him acknowledge that his business acumen hadn't been enough to protect him from predators. But the real turning point came when Trevor Hayes took the stand. Bryce walked him through the entire timeline, how GreenTech had evaluated my algorithm, how they had determined its value, how they had strategized to acquire it for the lowest possible price. Mr. Hayes, in your professional opinion, what was the fair market value of Dakota Mitchell's algorithm at the time GreenTech acquired it? Trevor didn't hesitate. Based on the projected cost savings and scalability, I would estimate between $75 million and $150 million. Conservative estimate. And what did GreenTech pay? $10,000. Why such a massive discrepancy? Because they deliberately targeted people who didn't understand what they had. The CEO, Doug Peterson, told me directly in a meeting that we needed to acquire the patent before the creator, Dakota, realized what it was worth. He said, and I quote, "We need to keep this quiet. If word gets out about what this technology can do, we'll have to pay market rate. Get the parents to sign before the daughter finds out." The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison banged her gavel, calling for order. GreenTech's lawyers were on their feet, objecting, claiming hearsay, demanding the testimony be stricken. But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. The CEO of GreenTech had explicitly instructed his team to hide the truth from me. After Trevor's testimony, the defense crumbled. GreenTech's lawyers tried to rehabilitate their case, bringing in expert witnesses to argue about valuation methodologies and market conditions. But nothing could overcome the fundamental truth that the emails and Trevor's testimony had revealed. They had known exactly what they were buying, and they had lied to get it cheap. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they came back, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. In the matter of Dakota Mitchell versus GreenTech Solutions and Amazon.com, Incorporated, we find in favor of the plaintiff. We award damages in the amount of $300 million. $300 million. I sat there, unable to fully process what I was hearing. Bryce grabbed my hand and squeezed it. Behind me, I heard my mother gasp. After the verdict was read, after the judge thanked the jury and set a date for final judgment, I walked out of the courtroom in a daze. The hallway was crowded with reporters, cameras, questions shouted from every direction. "Miss Mitchell, how does it feel to win? What are you going to do with the money? Do you have a message for your parents?" Bryce guided me through the crowd to a quiet alcove. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." I looked back toward the courtroom, where I could see Harold, Patricia, and Garrett standing with their lawyer. My father was staring at me, his expression unreadable. And then I saw them start walking toward me. My father reached me first, moving faster than I had seen him move in years. For a moment, I thought he might actually be angry, that he was going to yell at me in front of all these reporters. But when he stopped in front of me, his eyes were wet. "Dakota," he said, his voice hoarse. "Congratulations." I stared at him, not sure what to say. This was the man who had told me my work was worthless, the man who had sold my future for $10,000 and given half of it to my brother. Patricia came up beside him, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." The words should have meant something. Once upon a time, they would have meant everything. But standing there in the courthouse hallway, having just won $300 million, and the recognition I had fought so hard for, all I felt was tired. "Are you?" I asked quietly. "Are you really proud, or are you just impressed by the dollar amount?" Harold flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I looked at both of them, really looked at them for the first time in over a year. They looked older, smaller somehow. "You told me my patent was silly. You said I was wasting my time. You sold my work without even asking me because you thought you knew better." "We were wrong," Patricia said, her voice breaking. "Dakota, we were so wrong. We should have believed in you. We should have listened." Garrett hung back, his hands shoved in his pockets, looking younger than his 27 years. "Sis, I'm sorry too. For everything. For taking the money. For my startup failing. For being such an idiot about all of it. I wanted to be angry. Part of me wanted to throw their apology back in their faces to tell them it was too little, too late. But another part of me, the part that remembered family dinners and childhood Christmases, and the parents who had raised me even if they hadn't understood me, that part just felt sad. "I appreciate the apology," I said finally, "but I need you to understand something. I didn't do this for revenge. I didn't sue GreenTech to punish you or to prove you wrong. I did it because they stole my work, my recognition, my identity as a creator, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it." Harold nodded slowly. "I understand. And I want you to know that the $50 million your mother and I received from our settlement, we want to give you half, $25 million. It's the least we can do." "I don't want it." "Dakota, please." "Dad, I have $300 million. I don't need your money. What I needed was your support, your belief in me, your recognition that I was capable of something great. I needed that 3 years ago, and you couldn't give it to me." I took a breath, but I found it anyway. I found it in myself. Patricia reached out like she wanted to touch my arm, then pulled back. "What are you going to do now?" "I'm going to do what I should have done from the beginning. I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to create new technology, new innovations, things that matter. And this time, nobody can take it away from me." I looked at Garrett. And you asked if you could work for me someday. The answer is maybe, but not now. Not until you prove you've changed, that you understand the value of work and integrity. When you're ready, if you're ready, you can come find me." Garrett nodded, his eyes red. "I will. I promise I will." The reporters were starting to crowd closer, and Bryce touched my elbow. "We should go. You've got press statements to make." I nodded and started to walk away, then turned back one more time. "I don't hate you. Any of you. I'm just done letting you define my worth." The press conference was a blur. I stood at a podium with Bryce beside me and answered questions about the case, about my algorithm, about what it felt like to win. The whole time, I kept thinking about the girl I had been 3 years ago, sitting in her bedroom working on code that her family thought was worthless. I wished I could go back and tell her that it would all work out, that she was right to believe in herself, even when nobody else did. 1 year after the trial, I stood in the lobby of my new company headquarters in San Francisco. The building was in the financial district, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. The sign on the wall read Lumen Innovations in sleek, modern letters. We had 30 employees now, all brilliant engineers and developers working on the next generation of sustainable technology. Our first product, an upgraded version of my original algorithm, had already been licensed to 4 major tech companies. The company was valued at $400 million, and we were growing fast. Forbes had named me one of their 40 under 40 entrepreneurs. The article talked about my legal battle, my victory over green tech, my determination to succeed on my own terms. They called me a visionary, a pioneer, an inspiration to young women in tech. But the recognition that meant the most came from a different source. One day, I received an email from a college student in Ohio. She told me that my story had inspired her to keep working on her own invention, even though her family thought it was impractical. She said that knowing I had stood up for myself, that I had fought and won, had given her the courage to believe in her own dreams. I printed that email and put it on my office wall. Because that was what it was all about, really. Not the money, not the company valuation, not even the vindication of being proven right. It was about showing people that you could be dismissed, betrayed, knocked down, and still get back up. My relationship with my family was complicated now. We talked occasionally, mostly emails and the odd phone call. I saw them once a year at Thanksgiving, a tradition I maintained more out of nostalgia than genuine closeness. Harold and Patricia had used their $50 million to retire comfortably to a house in Arizona. They sent me birthday cards and asked about my company, and I answered politely but distantly. Garrett had taken my challenge to heart. He got a job at a marketing firm, worked his way up, paid off his debts. Every 6 months or so, he would send me an email updating me on his progress. I haven't hired him yet, but I haven't ruled it out completely either. People can change if they really want to. As for me, I learned some hard truths through all of this. I learned that not everyone deserves your trust, even if they're family. I learned that sometimes the people who should support you most will be the ones who doubt you hardest. I learned that believing in yourself is not optional, it's essential, because there will be times when you're the only one who does. But I also learned that I was stronger than I ever imagined, that I could stand alone, fight alone, and win alone, that my worth wasn't determined by my family's approval or anyone else's validation. It was determined by what I created, what I built, what I contributed to the world. Now, sitting in my office overlooking San Francisco Bay, I often think about that moment in my tiny Austin apartment when I saw the news about green tech being sold for over $1 billion. I remember the despair I felt, the sense that I had lost everything that mattered. But I hadn't lost everything. They had taken my patent. They had taken the recognition I deserved, but they couldn't take my talent, my determination, or my future. Those things were mine, and mine alone. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. I glanced at the screen and smiled. It was a venture capital firm from Silicon Valley, one of the biggest in the industry. Dakota Mitchell, I answered. Miss Mitchell, this is Jennifer Crawford from Sequoia Capital. We've been following your company's progress, and we'd like to discuss a significant investment opportunity. We're prepared to offer $200 million for a 15% stake. $200 million. And this time, I was the one in control. I was the one who would read the contracts, negotiate the terms, make the decisions. Send me your proposal, I said. I'll review it with my team and get back to you within a week. Excellent. And Miss Mitchell? It's an honor to work with someone of your caliber. What you've built is truly impressive. After we hung up, I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there were other young women working on their own dreams, facing their own doubts and obstacles. Some of them had families who believed in them. Some of them, like me, had to find that belief within themselves. I hoped my story would reach them. I hoped they would know that it was possible to be knocked down and still rise up, that it was possible to be betrayed and still triumph, that it was possible to start with nothing but an idea and turn it into something that changed the world. My parents had sold my project for $10,000. Today, the technology I created was worth over $1 billion and had revolutionized an entire industry. They had begged me to share the settlement, to forgive them, to let them back into my success. And I had chosen something better than revenge. I had chosen to build my own future, on my own terms, with my own strength. That was the real victory. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had someone doubt your dreams? Have you ever been told that what you're working on isn't worth it? How did you respond? I want to hear your stories in the comments below. And if my story inspired you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they think, that their dreams matter, that they can overcome betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, no matter who doubts you, no matter who tries to take what's yours, you have the power to stand up, fight back, and create the life you deserve. I believe in you. Now go out there and prove everyone wrong.